What's the purpose of Rishi Sunak making this trip? There's rather a lot to deal with at the moment here, isn't there?
Yeah, there is an awful lot to deal with. The Prime Minister's got a pretty busy schedule, actually, over the next couple of days or so. As you've been talking about this morning, he's meeting those farmers and food industry chiefs in Downing Street. He's then going to nip, effectively, across to Iceland, as you do this afternoon, for this Council of Europe meeting. I think there's a whole range of issues that Rishi Sunak clearly feels quite strongly about why he wants to be in that room. Not least of all, he wants to raise this issue of migration. Clearly one of his 5 pledges is around illegal migration, not what you guys have just been talking about, but illegal migration with the Stop the Boats across the English Channel. And this, unsurprisingly, is not a challenge that's just facing the UK. It is a challenge faced by most European countries. And effectively there is an argument to be made that this will only be solved with a greater cooperation and a sense of how Europe as a whole could deal with migration. So he's likely to raise that. But second of all, you know, again, we come back to this issue. We saw it with President Zelensky in the UK yesterday. The Council of Europe, Russia was a member. It has been suspended since that invasion last year, and there is a real sense of wanting to show solidarity. We're expecting President Zelensky to dial in to that meeting, and also an affirmation from the current members that Russia is not only doing wrong, but is going to have to do right in the future in terms of potentially its restoration of Ukraine when this war comes to an end. But then the Prime Minister leaves that meeting today. There's not many journalists with him, and he's effectively then not really going to come back here for very long before he goes to a G7 meeting in Japan.
OK.
Instead of having this European Council meeting in Iceland, I never think about Iceland as being part of Europe.
No.
Isn't it a Nordic country?
Yes. Well,
is that for me? What?
Yeah, why Iceland,
Why
Darren?
Iceland?
Well, because the Council of Europe is actually, it's got nothing to do with the European Union. It's a much wider body, hence why Russia was in it. But, you know, physically, technically, is Iceland on the European continental shelf? It is. It is part of the EEA as well. You can travel if you're an EU citizen to Iceland. Obviously, it's got long historical links to Denmark and to the other Nordic countries. In fact, it used to have very strong links to the UK and Ireland way back in the day, a very long time ago, particularly to Scotland. So, yeah, I think, on the whole, you can regard...
Yeah. Thank you, Darren.
In the Eurovision sense of the word. In the Eurovision sense of the word.
Right. And Darren, he's getting a few air miles this week because he's going to Tokyo as well. Political leaders who are in political trouble often go abroad to burnish their credentials as international statesmen and women. Mrs. Thatcher was in Paris when it all fell apart, of course.
Yeah, indeed, and we've often found that. I mean, I just walk on 2 things. I mean, first of all, I mean, the G7, he can't really afford to miss that. It's the main big international summit of the year, alongside the G20. I mean, the UK's going to be one of, what, seven member states there. So he, alongside President Biden and, you know, EU leaders and Xi Jinping and others. So he will definitely need to be at that. But you're right, he is away for quite a long time. He's going to miss PMQs tomorrow. He's not back, I think, until the start of next week. In terms of the political trouble he's in, clearly there are waves and a bit of bubbles and turbulence here and there. But it is interesting that someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who, let's be honest about it, TV News presenter, but someone who's very critical of this current government, also very clearly stated at the weekend now was not the time for a change of leader. I think he said it would be political suicide to do so before the next general election. So while, yes, there are difficulties at home, I don't think there's any actual threat to his premiership.